Today we are talking about horse sweat being used to preserve meat. You heard me, horse sweat. Now, I'm not saying this is standard practice, but if you stick with me for a moment, I'm going to recount some actual stories where practices like this are believed to have been used. There are even stories of it being used here in South Africa. But we aren't the only ones to get this crazy. There are stories spanning hundreds of years in different parts of the world using similar methods, if you could believe it. Me personally, well, I think this is more than a meat story. I think this is a story about how creative humans become when survival is involved. Because if people separated by continents, languages, and hundreds of years all end up solving the same problem in similar ways, then maybe humans are more alike than we think. And maybe, just maybe, when people get desperate enough, we all become a little bit weird. Don't get me wrong, the idea of eating horse sweat, biltong, is horrifying to say the least. Trust me. My name is Rian and I'm from DJ's Biltong. In this series, we discuss South African meat snacks, biltong, history, and more. In today's episode, we'll be looking at two different stories from history, where people believed to have used their horses to help preserve meat. Now, whether these stories are completely true, partly true, somewhere in the middle, versions of them have survived centuries, which means people kept finding something believable, or at least meaningful in them. So sit back and let's go back to a time before fridges, before Uber Eats, to when self-sufficiency ruled the world, and when you had to get creative sometimes to survive. So our first story starts in the Cape region of South Africa, where ordinary life was no walk in the park. But compared to what was coming, well, life had structure. People lived over the land and the animals they raised. And well, if I say it like that, it sounds like simpler times. At least, that's what I thought when I first started researching it. But the more I researched, the more I realized I was wrong. This is what ordinary life looked like before the Great Track. People farmed, fished, raised livestock. People did eat meat. But meat was valuable. If you slaughtered an animal, you wanted to use as much of it as you possibly can. So the question became, how do you make the meat last? And there were multiple ways. People dried meat, salted meat. They used smoke and airflow to assist in preserving food. So they preserved food in ways that gave them more time. There were even cool storage rooms. And this method stayed in use much closer to modern times than you would think. I remember being a kid and my grandparents telling me stories of using cold rooms on their farm when they were younger. So the point I'm actually trying to make is life wasn't easy, but there were creature comforts. With good planning, some hard work, and a little bit of grace, everyday life carried on. Now, if you're like me, you're probably thinking, if they could already preserve meat, where does the horse sweat come in? Well, you can't exactly load your pantry and your cold room onto a wagon, now can you? Let's come back to modern times for a second. Imagine you're on a camping trip for a week. You plan how much food you need, how much meat, how much firewood, clothes, drinks, snacks, all the rest. You planned for it. Now, imagine I told you, pack for a trip, but you don't know when it ends. You can only travel by horse and wagon. How much do you pack now? What do you pack now? You see, this was one of the first challenges people faced during the Great Track. Every necessity had to earn its place on that wagon. So they loaded the wagons, tools, animals, food, household goods, supplies, all went onto the wagon, and they set off. And at first, people already knew methods of preserving food. They had the supplies with them, animals traveled with them and could be hunted. But traveling changes things. Resources become limited, and suddenly, preserving meat becomes a different problem. You can't slaughter an animal and then waste most of it. And there was no checkers or pick and pay you could quickly run into, come back and grab what you need. You had what you brought. So people had to get creative for their own survival. Now, this is where the part of the story comes weird. One version of the story says, when normal preservation methods became difficult, travelers started experimenting. And one of their stories involved cutting meat into thin strips, placing it on their saddles while traveling, and then hanging it afterwards to dry. Now, before anybody gets angry, I don't think horse sweat was some kind of magic ingredient. But there are parts of the story that kind of make sense, in a strange way. Sweat contains salt, movement compresses the meat, and hanging it afterwards could help remove the moisture. So could all of this help the meat last a little bit longer? Possibly. But it would have been uncontrolled, unreliable, and absolutely definitely not something we should copy today. But while researching, I couldn't help notice something. Even today, we cut the meat, season it, tenderize it, hang it, and dry it. Biltong. I'm not saying that the methods were exactly the same, but they were trying to solve the same problem as us. For us, it's a snack. For them, it may have been survival. So now, I'm not sure if I should be grossed out, surprised, or impressed. And honestly, I'm not even sure the story is true. But stories don't survive for hundreds of years for no reason. Somebody, somewhere, at some point, must have thought there was enough truth in it to keep telling it. And whether that truth was preserving meat, surviving, or just people becoming slightly unhinged when they get hungry, I don't know. But I have one more story to tell you, because I could find another version of this idea using surprisingly similar methods. Only this time, it's much, much earlier, and on an entirely different continent. This story goes so far back that historians can't even fully agree on who did this, when they did it, or even why. But the story survived, and like we've already established, stories survive because somebody found something believable or meaningful in them. So imagine going on that same camping trip now, but only you get a horse and that's it. How do you prepare it now? Now it's speculated that some steppe horse cultures across Asia and Eastern Europe may have used similar methods, but historians aren't really sure why or who did it. Some say it was to preserve or carry meat, some say emergency food, others say the meat may have been placed there for the horse's sake, to help protect his back from the saddle. But the story goes, people would cut meat into thin strips, place it under their saddles, and later remove it, sometimes to eat, and in some variations, to hang out and dry. Sounds familiar? Look, I don't know which theory is correct, and I'm not a historian, but personally, I can understand how people could possibly have resorted to something like this. Nietzsche once wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow." And I think that might be what these stories are really about. The method sounds strange to us. It sounds bizarre. But if survival really was the reason, then the need behind it was very simple. They were trying to find a way. If I learned anything from all this, it's to always look a little bit deeper. When I first saw that horse weight might have been used to preserve meat, my reaction was, this is going to make a funny story to tell. But the more I researched, the less I laughed. I found myself imagining these stories, putting myself in these people's shoes, asking myself, if I was there, would I do the same? Would the same survival instincts that drove them drive me? And honestly, I'm not sure. But I do know it made me thankful for what I have, because even today, people are still adapting, still surviving, still finding ways. And in some strange way, it's comforting to think that the same human instincts that helped these people hundreds and even thousands of years ago might still be helping us today. You know, I don't know about anyone else, but something inside me now wants to walk into the bush and see if those survival instincts still work. But honestly, I probably have more confidence than skill these days. Even more realistically, my wife would probably come looking for me before I got the chance to find out. Thank you guys for joining me today. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe and follow us. And if after all of this, you suddenly feel like the urge to eat some biltong, you can get some in the link below. 100% all sweat free guaranteed. I'll catch you in the next video.